How do you come up with an interesting, worthwhile argument, otherwise known as a thesis, for your essay? In other words, how do you go from whatever it is you're trying to write about to an argument that both you and your reader would actually find valid, interesting, and persuasive? My name is Lusia Zaitseva and I teach writing at Harvard University. I'm also the founder of IvyWrite, and in today's video, I'm going over the top 3 things you need to keep in mind so you can go from simply absorbing information passively from others to actually producing original insights of your own. The first step, and some of you are not going to like this, is to actually reread and re-examine whatever it is you're trying to write about. If you read a poem or short story or an essay, go ahead and reread it. If you read a longer work, skim the important parts, and I hope you took good notes. Rewatch the film, study the data again, look at the painting. After all, no worthwhile insight comes from looking at something just once, right? You should do this a minimum of 1 time before you actually start writing, and keep in mind that you're going to end up revisiting whatever it is you're writing about a bunch of times in the process. Once you've done that, something about what you've read should strike you as strange, interesting, or noteworthy. We'll call that thing a snag. You know, like if you put on your favorite sweater only to discover that there's a loose thread because maybe you got stuck on a nail somewhere. A snag is something that makes you want to look again because it catches your attention. If you're writing about a literary text, it might be a really strange word choice to describe a character or a particularly striking metaphor that catches you off guard. If you're writing about an essay or scholarly text, it might be a claim you don't think is fully substantiated, or maybe an internal contradiction. If you're working with data, and this could be historical, statistical, you name it, it could be something in the data set that just doesn't make sense. Like maybe in a certain population, you find a lower incidence of a disease than you would expect. Or perhaps in a primary historical document, you see an attitude reflected that contradicts the popularly held attitude you thought people had at the time. All of those are snags, and if you think about it, the metaphor is really an apt one, because if you pull on the loose thread, the whole sweater is going to come apart. Or, to put it another way, you'll unravel whatever mystery it is that you've stumbled upon. Whatever you notice, trust that unless you're just confused about the evidence, you're probably onto something. If, on the other hand, your question can be answered by just studying the source a little bit more carefully, then you probably need to dig a little bit deeper. Let's assume you have. The next step is to ask a question. We talked a little bit about analytical questions in last week's video, which I'll link here, and we'll talk about them again in next week's video. But here are some examples based on the snags we just saw a moment ago, and a few new ones. In Isaac Babel's short story, My First Goose, why does the narrator describe the army commander's legs as girls sheathed to the neck in shining riding boots? How can we draw the line between illness and simple divergence from the norm in Harvard professor Michael Sandel's argument about the proper uses of genetic enhancement? Is waiving patent protection for the COVID-19 vaccine an effective solution to unequal access? You'll notice that all of these questions are genuine, open-ended questions, and they're pretty interesting too. The first one opens up a portal into questions of masculinity and belonging in the writing of one of the greatest Russian authors of the 20th century. The second helps us think about a pressing problem waiting just around the bend of human progress. And the third one, well, need I really say more? The answer to the question you come up with as a result of studying the source carefully, trusting your gut, and posing your curiosity or confusion as a question will be your thesis. Easy, right? If you work this way, though, you'll be so much more likely to come up with a genuinely interesting thesis that you actually want to write and other people want to read. In next week's video, we'll go over the nitty-gritty details of how to evaluate the answer to your question once you've actually got it. This is what's called the thesis test. Have you encountered other helpful ways for coming up with a thesis? Let me know down in the comments below, and like and subscribe to the channel if you found this video helpful so you'll know when I come out with the next one. See you next time.